Welcome to the Tech Matchmaker, the show where contact center challenges meet their perfect tech match. I'm your host, Gina Gibson, and in just 15 minutes, we serve up the smartest, coolest innovations shaking up the contact center industry. Whether you're searching for your next solution or just love staying ahead of the curve, we've got the insights to keep you in the know. Let's dive in and discover what's next. I promise you, it's going to be fun. Good day, everybody. Today we are chatting with Dan Keddy, the Vice President of Channel Sales from Procedureflow. Dan, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for taking time to chat with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Gina. We're really excited to be here.
Excellent. Let's start with the basics. Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been in sales for 25 plus years. Majority of my career has been in SaaS, and I've worked for some of the heavyweights like Xerox and Salesforce, and then I've worked for startups like Procedureflow, Anywhere Group, and kind of always lended my talents kind of in two camps. I've either been on the channel side or I've been leading the direct sales campaign. So I've always kind of lived in both camps.
That's great. And I always ask our guests, tell us something about yourself that we won't find on LinkedIn.
I lived in Aruba for a year when I was 16. So a good time to be 16 in the Caribbean. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, give us your elevator pitch. What does Procedureflow do?
Sure. What makes Procedureflow different is, we're not a traditional knowledge management platform. We focus on visual knowledge. And for a lot of folks, when you think of traditional knowledge management systems, you're thinking of text-heavy PDFs, Word docs. And what we did is we realized very early on, Procedureflow has been around for about 10 years, that, most people learn visually. MIT and Harvard have the argument. One of them says 70%, the other says 65% of, people of the population learn visually. And what we realized was, for most people, they're looking for more than just the PDF or the text document. They're actually looking for the answers, and along with the answers, they're actually looking for guidance on how to do whatever that task or process. So what we realized was, if we could take out the core message, put it into basically a visualized flowchart that gives people the guidance based on 6 shapes and 6 colors, it really helps them to address the concern. Because I think you'll find, Gina, more and more, especially since the entrance of AI, everyone really just wants outcomes. Mm-hmm. So inherently, if I can give you the answer, but then how to get to the outcome with that answer, I'm putting you in a much better place, whether you're an agent or using AI.
And building off that, what kind of results are your customers seeing? Like, can you give us a sense of the impact in terms of numbers or metrics as far as what your typical customer might experience?
I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is for organizations that are looking at like training. Let's say it took them 12 weeks to do training or 6 weeks to do training, or even, maybe it takes, 3 months. We're able to cut most of their training in half. So if you could simply imagine being able to take an agent and put them on the floor 50% sooner, have them to proficiency that much faster. I think that's the biggest thing that we're enabling. The other part around that too is the more complex, the better. So what we're finding is if you look at our ICP, so like utilities, banking and finance and insurance, obviously there's a lot of self-service that goes on now with the different solutions. However, when a person hits zero or wants to get to an agent or has gotten past AI, they really want to get to that answer. So we find that by being able to be validated, curated, and verified, we're letting people get that answer right away for those more important conversations where a human really needs to kind of be involved.
And it's an interesting point you bring. So why, it's more in the complexity, and I think you answered it, but why has visual knowledge management become such a critical issue for contact centers?
I think what we're learning is that, when you look at the average contact center agent, and then you look at the advent now of AI on top of that, systems and people it's easy for them to follow a shape than it is for them to go in and into text and actually look. Because if you think about an SOP, there's probably 7 paragraphs, right? In that SOP, you really need 3 sentences. But I've got to take the time to read all 7 paragraphs before I get to those answers. By actually pulling out the specifics, the chunks of knowledge you actually need, and then framing them, like I mentioned before, with the 6 shapes and 6 colors, over time, because your mind's trained, what those colors mean, what those shapes mean, and it allows you to jump to the proper conclusion, not a conclusion, that actually delivers an answer to your customer.
I love that. And so explain a little bit, because we've talked about it where do you fit in? Like, how do you fit into a company's existing tech stack? Are you a learning management system? Are you a training system? Like, where do you classify yourself, or what do you integrate with?
I think the big thing for us is, I think you've had others on before in the knowledge management space, and I think a lot of us would answer the same way. Knowledge management is so broad, right? It's such a broad swath, and I would actually, I would throw it out there that knowledge management for a lot of folks is document management of the 90s. They haven't really turned it into knowledge, it's just data, right? And I think that's the part where we stand out as kind of a true knowledge management solution, in the sense that when we meet with a customer and we're rolling out Procedureflow for the first time, and we're helping them kind of map their processes and their procedures, what we're actually doing is we're consolidating the data. Like I mentioned before, we're making sure it's validated, we're making sure it's curated, and we're making sure that the version is correct. And then we're taking that data, and through our process, we're actually turning it into knowledge. And I think that's the interesting piece, because I think and I'm sure you've had many of these conversations, people believe they've got knowledge, but when you actually sit down and break it down with them, it's silos of data. They haven't actually taken that step to enable that information to become knowledge. And I think that's where, we stand out compared to a lot of others. And I think that's the biggest piece for us, is we really are kind of that traditional knowledge base. I hate to throw it out there, and I hate to say it because it's buzzword bingo right now, but it is true. When Procedureflow is implemented properly, it does become that single source of truth.
I like that. Where do you see, just kind of circling back to the verticals in your ICP, where do you see Procedureflow making the biggest impact? Like, is there a sweet spot industry? You mentioned complex cases, or a specific use case where you guys are just crushing it.
The more regulated, the better we're doing. We're finding. So utilities is probably our biggest practice right now, followed by insurance. And when I say insurance, we do cover kind of the gamut: property, casualty, and health. One of our biggest customers is the fourth largest health insurer in the US. So you can just imagine probably who that is. But what we're finding is it's because when something goes wrong in a regulated industry, there's so many tripwires that happen, right? And if you don't follow the process of the procedure properly, fines can happen. Potentially in like a utility, someone's job could or someone's life could potentially be on the line. You trip the wrong switch and something like that happens. And then we find too, a lot of times we're in the midst of a crisis. So if you think about it in terms of like the utilities, especially those poor utilities kind of across kind of Texas and Florida the last couple of years, hurricanes and major storms. If you look at kind of even last week with some of the snowstorms on the East Coast, they're dealing with situations in real time, right? And they need to have the right answer now so that they can, get their constituents back up and get them, able to operate with their power grid or solution or, local line.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit before we started recording, but
Sure.
tell us what's next for Procedureflow.
The biggest thing right now is we're leaning into the Agentic API, and I think that's an important part for us. What we've realized, and what we believe to be true, is that if you get your knowledge sources correct, and you get them, again, validated and curated and verified, I think the biggest piece there is an AI agent, just like your human agent, should be able to follow those flows. So you do the work once, but it's available to either your virtual agents or your live agents. And I think that's a key piece for us. And we believe that because of using our flowcharting methodology, with shapes and colors, that is an easier format for a machine to read, and therefore should deliver a much better experience from an AI perspective. Because as you all know, I'm sure you're living this every day too, Gina, as a consultant, you're hearing about those folks that went out early on and were like, the CEO kind of pounded the desk and said, hey, we got to jump on this AI thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know really what it means. I don't know how it's going to affect our business, but I don't want to fall behind. And as a result, a lot of people raced to it. They implemented, but they didn't necessarily do the foundational layer work. And I think that's where Procedureflow really shines is, again, we come in with our partners and directly as well, and we work through kind of that mapping process. Late last year, we introduced a new feature called the AI Process Designer, and that it literally allows you to build your processes in real time using AI. So it's as simple as, you think about the process. I want a new process for vacation policy, and it will spit out, an actual flow-charted process that you can immediately, with some tweaks, put into Procedureflow and off you go. But it takes the lift away. And I think inherently we're super excited. We're working through kind of our beta phases now, but we hope by the summer of this year we'll have that out and ready for the public to be using.
That's fantastic. And what a great application for startups or companies that don't have the processes in place, right? Making it easier. Can you share a quick success story with us from one of your clients?
Sure. I think one of the ones that we would highlight, it's probably actually on our website, is we've done some things with Medavie Blue Cross. They're on the East Coast here in Canada. We're actually Canadian. And they were able to cut their training times by 40%. They were able to reduce AHT. And again, that's health insurance, right? So think about it, someone's calling because they don't understand the coverage, right? And if any of us have ever read those documents, sometimes it's hard to find the right answer. So being able to, actually get their staff up and running and proficient and out on the floor, and then able to ask questions or answer questions in a timely manner. I think the biggest thing is with your experience, Gina, in CX, we laugh about this ourselves is, when you have a great experience, you tell no one. When you have a bad experience, you tell 50 people or 100 people. It's kind of like, it's like a fisherman's tale, right? It goes from 5 to 1,000.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's part of it is what we're always trying to do. And the core of what kind of Procedureflow came from is the original mission, which is still critical to us today, was how do we empower the agent, right? Inherently, if we empower the agent with the right information to be able to give the right answer, then they have a great internal customer experience that they then share with the market. And then that person who called in has a great customer experience. And the circle kind of goes on about how well that customer feels about, the experience that they just had. Because as the benefit of living in North America is you have choice. So if you don't have a great experience somewhere, you can go somewhere else. And I think that's, for everyone, we're always trying to kind of make sure that everyone has a great customer experience. So that's a big one for us. And there's several others. If you do pop onto our website, we have several use cases that you can kind of see some wins, and it's in all of our major ICPs. So anything from banking to insurance to even municipal government has been a big win for us as of late. Because what we're finding, and I'm not sure, Gina, how much time you spent with municipalities or if they're in your customer bailiwick, but they essentially are having this challenge with tribal knowledge because all these people are retiring. COVID started this great retirement journey, all right, for a lot of folks, and they've retired. And who used to do that? Well, that was Jim. Well, Jim left, and now we don't have that information available to us. So we've had a lot of municipalities come out and say, hey, we find this really easy to use. It's good for our constituents because they're getting the answers they need, but we're also able to map the processes and the kind of the tribal knowledge before someone goes out on retirement. So that's actually been, last year, that was one of our biggest growth areas.
That's fascinating, actually. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would like the audience to know?
I think the important part of my role, and you mentioned earlier, is the VP of Channel. What we found is our partners have really helped us elevate our game in the last. I joined about 5 years ago, so we've seen a huge uptick with our partner channel over the last 5 years. We're to the point now where our partners are delivering 25 to 30% of our revenue year in and year out, and that continues to grow. And I think it's because of they see the value of what Procedureflow can bring to their customer base, and I think that's always a testament to the work we're doing, but also that they see value. They understand what their customers, like last year we ran into you at Experience, and we were talking, and I think it's one of those situations where you really don't understand the power of partnerships until you start to harness those. And then one of the things that I think we've done well, and I noticed from some of your other podcast guests, like we have an integration now with NICE, we have an integration with Genesys, we have an integration with AWS and Salesforce. So, we're making sure we're in the right places at the right time. And then as kind of these up and coming solutions are coming through, we're making sure that we have a really good integration strategy. And we're excited for where the back half of the year goes, because as you know, probably a lot of folks are leaning into MCP to try to get these new integrations off the ground. And that's something too that we will be leaning into as well. So we're getting it to a point now where the reality is if a customer has a specific, platform that they like to use that's important to their tech stack, there will be some way we can either integrate or embed. And I think that's the key, because, if you can help a customer leverage their existing tech stack, you're already winning.
Exactly, exactly. Dan, thanks so much. And to wrap things up, I've always been a fan of James Lipton, so we do a little rapid fire to
Sure.
end the podcast. So, what sound or noise do you love?
Sound or noise? I love car engine sounds. I like, especially if you really want to. If you were to play a '69 Camaro SS, I heard that 454 roll, I'd be pretty happy. American muscle, I love it.
Awesome. What sound or noise do you hate?
Probably a smoke alarm. That irritating. Like I'd probably confess to stuff that I
Yeah,
didn't do if you played that for any length of time.
that's excellent. And what profession other than your own would you love to do?
I actually started out in university as a student of marine biology.
Oh,
So it's one of those, yeah, it's one of those weird things where I looked at the landscape and I thought, I'd really like to be a marine biologist. And I was like, wait a minute, no one's hiring those. So I better go to business school. So I went to business school. But I've always had that affinity for kind of marine biology, kind of zoology. I think that would have been something of interest because, I feel really blessed. I live in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. We have a lot of nature around us. So I get to see a lot of nature, on a regular basis. And I think we take that for granted a lot because of our travels or busy schedules. But I think anything to do with animals would probably been where I would have liked to. Not a vet, because then you would have had to put things down. And that's
down,
not what
yeah.
I like to do.
Dan, if somebody wants more information about Procedureflow, who should they reach out to?
I hope they'd reach out to you first. And then I hope that they'd get redirected to procedureflow.com. And, we have a Drift, I think, account there. So someone could definitely, patch in there and get someone live right away to answer questions.
Wonderful. Dan, thank you so much for coming on today. I've really enjoyed our conversation and I appreciate learning more about Procedureflow and I look forward to your new release mid-year.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the platform. Appreciate it. And thanks for being a partner. We appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out with us on the Tech Matchmaker. I hope today's spotlight sparks some fresh ideas and real solutions for your contact center. Want to dive deeper into the tech we featured? Hit up the show notes for all the links and extras, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if there's a challenge you want us to tackle, don't be shy, reach out. I'll catch you soon with more innovation, more use cases, and more ways to keep your business moving forward. Stay curious, stay bold, and keep exploring what's next.